Two Babies in a Business, a podcast about business, marketing, growth strategy, staff, clients, babies, and marriage. I am Christina. This is Peter. We're founders and leaders of CIPR Communication. We're both wearing green today, twinsies.
And I look tired. I'd be lying if I didn't say I didn't have a bottle of wine yesterday.
I have transformed. Well, maybe I always was the responsible one.
I've been really good lately. I just yesterday was thirsty, so it's all good. I feel good. It's all good.
It's all good.
Anyways, enough about me and my debaucherous ways. We're here to talk, continue our series on whether to hire in-house or hire an agency. And today we're kind of talking about, we're still trying to figure out what we're going to call this episode, but really kind of resource reviews or keeping a constant eye on your resource mix.
I know.
Lines.
The evolution of your resources.
Yeah. So, I mean, the point I think of today's episode is to talk about the fact that, like, okay, so you've made some decisions, you hired an agency, maybe you have a staff person, maybe you don't, whatever. But like, it's not a set and forget kind of situation. And things change, things evolve. And it's something I think that, you need to be at least quarterly be thinking about, I would say, but probably, constantly have your eye on this in terms of the right mix for your business. And, it's kind of an interesting time of year for us to be recording this episode because it's sort of many of our clients come up for their renewal of their contracts, and we're renegotiating and talking about sort of where things are at. And yeah, I mean, people make business decisions, things change, people buy new equipment, whatever, businesses are constantly evolving, living creatures. And similar to how your business constantly evolves, your marketing team should be evolving constantly. And people leave, right? Your jobs, things like that. So, there's all kinds of situations that may trigger a need to be thinking about your resources and to be evolving your strategy when it comes to hiring in-house and or using an agency.
It's true. I think I've made a couple observations on the staff side over the years. So I feel like there's two components here, obviously in-house resources and your agency. And I think from a staff perspective, and this is me speaking from even our own internal teams I've been on and on the corporate side, and just like witnessing clients. So one, your staff's interests may change, especially in the world of marketing and sales. I would argue that a lot of our clients and prospects, there's this kind of marketing sales component. I think especially when you get into the tourism space or kind of the, even energy or manufacturing space, usually your marketing person or persons may be split between kind of a sales and a marketing role. And I think from that perspective, like, interests change, right? Like even internally, we know, 1 year someone may be really passionate about SEO and understanding it, and if they're the type of personality that's about the next fresh challenge, then maybe they need to master something else and that's boring them now. Or maybe they've just decided they don't like it and they're gravitating towards social media or public relations. So I think there's that like constant pulse check on, like, if you have good staff that you want to keep and have potential, like, are they still focused on what they need to?
Right.
And then I think, like, coupled with that, there's this interesting kind of, review with staff in terms of like, where are you actually spending your time?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of the times, especially if you're like in that kind of director level role or C-suite, it's like, okay, you've seen the tactical plan, the marketing strategy, you're assuming it's being executed. But if you dig deep into it or have that conversation, maybe that person actually was supposed to engage influencers and create a whole influencer campaign and go for it, but actually their entire time was spent on, building landing pages out for a website for a PPC. Like, you don't necessarily, there's how you expected it to go and how it actually went.
Right.
And I think that often you forget to check in and ask, is this still a priority? Is it not? So that kind of where are they actually spending their time? And then my third observation, my final observation on the staff side is like similar to where they're spending their time, but like where is the most action happening in the business right now?
Right.
So it's like, I just got off a call with a long-term client, and we were talking about their in-house marketing individual, talking about our contract and what CIPR is going to be working on with them through the next year. And we both made this kind of, realization, I guess, or statement on the call that like the marketing person is heavily focused in the sales world right now. And that's not a bad thing.
Right.
But it was important for us both to recognize that there's tons of opportunities that are coming from what that individual is doing. But there's 4 or 5 marketing tasks that I think at the beginning of the year, we all figured, okay, this will sit on this person's desk and not necessarily ours.
Yeah.
But after that conversation, we went, oh no, there's still room to push this ball forward, and let's keep this individual focused here. So it's kind of what's going on in your business, what's going on with the individual, and then like what is actually happening.
Right. Yeah. And I think the what is actually happening question is a really good one. And I think, I mean, if you don't have your eye constantly on the ball, then balls get dropped, and it's nobody's fault, and people get pulled in all kinds of directions. And that's something we pride ourselves in terms of as an agency. We've implemented some systems and processes recently to really make sure we're focused on, okay, this is what we've been hired to do. Here's our tactical plan. Here's our monthly. Here's how much time we're spending everywhere. So we've gotten really good at it, but clients obviously don't have that same necessarily discipline because it's just not necessarily their focus. Or they're looking at different bigger picture items or whatever. And it's like sometimes really really important balls are getting dropped, and sometimes those balls can have a major impact on your entire process and strategy and what you're trying to execute, and sometimes people don't even realize it, right? And so I think a quarterly check-in at a minimum is like pretty important, just to really kind of sort of make sure that everybody's going in the same direction, and that the direction continues to be the important direction. Because that's the other thing, right? It's like, a business may make a decision to change direction on something, and they may not necessarily be communicating that to their agency or their staff, or people are spending all this time and effort working in one direction, meanwhile the organization is going somewhere completely different, right? So
well, I think it's like actually kind of brings us around to like how do you effectively manage an agency, or how do you effectively like keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on? Because we talk a lot about empowerment and stepping back and trusting. And I think if you're, a director level, or you're that business owner that is trying to and hopefully succeeding at stepping back from day-to-day marketing tasks, you're empowered your staff, you've empowered your agency's being project managed effectively. Like these check-ins are your opportunity to be the boss.
Right.
Right? Like this is when you should be asking the key questions of going back to your tactical plan, your strategy, where's this at? Or what are we enjoying? This is when you review the reports. We talked to a client yesterday who told us, oh, don't even send me a report anymore because I never have time to read it. And it's funny to me because it's like, we're not going to stop sending you reports. Like,
yeah.
It's just as much for us to know kind of where but
his point was like, I know that you guys are doing great work because my phone is ringing off the hook, and that's the only report he needs, and that's daily feedback for him. Right?
Like my argument there would be like, it seems time consuming, and I feel like reports, no matter what they're for, I have like an inbox full of reports from God knows who, and it's like they're just things you don't get to. But it's like at these kind of quarterly meetings or these check-ins, or monthly, whatever they end up being, like as the boss, so business owner or director / manager, you've empowered your team, stuff is happening. At those check-ins, it's about looking back at the strategy, looking back at the tactical plan, how are things going, and like pulling that report up and going, wow, we're killing it on SEO.
Right.
What do we need to do here to maintain this? Or is there no action? Ooh, this like campaign really fell flat on social media. Nobody's taught, is everyone okay if we garbage this? Let's garbage it. Let's move on. Like, I think those are and I think this resonates with me because I feel like over the last several years, I have been trying to figure out what a boss does. But I think like these are the circumstances where you go, all right, I've empowered my team. These are the things I need to check in on, and who's
Yeah.
doing what, how's capacity. But like if you are wanting to add value and you are wanting to get out of the way, here's where you do it. And I
Yeah.
think,
Well, and I was going to say, though, I think the caveat to this conversation is like, make sure not to be micromanaging, because I think that's the other area where a lot of leaders really get in their own way and they micromanage the shit out of everything to
yeah,
the point where nothing good happens. And it's actually like, we can see this all the time. And it's like, those who trust and empower, amazing things happen. And those who micromanage and get in the way, it's like, it's painful for everybody, and like, and just it slows everything down. And I see a lot of leaders getting in their own way, and like caring about, oh, that post went up at the wrong time, or I didn't like this little one thing on one social media post or whatever.
yeah,
And it's like real, like I always say to Christina, this is something I always say to her is like, is that a $300 an hour task? Because you're a $300 an hour person. It's like, no, so don't do it. like stop. Right. And it's hard because, everybody thinks that they need to be, and I struggle with this too, that they need to have their hands on everything and know what's going on. But like, that is like the most dysfunctional way to succeed ever, in my opinion.
it's such a balance though,
It is a
because
balance.
I would argue there are like three types of clients, and it's like the ones that have empowered, like your first one, like the ones who have empowered, it's working, it's great, it's wonderful for everybody. They're following the advice to a T-ish. You have the micromanagers who you're supposed to be dealing with a marketing manager, and some person keeps inserting themselves and driving the bus a completely different direction. And again, maybe based on your business or your industry, you need to do that, but probably not. And then I think there's this third individual who has unsuccessfully empowered, but have taken their eyes off of it, right?
Yeah.
So you've set the resources in place, there's a strategy, you've done everything right, but you've forgotten this step of empowerment. And I feel like you will know if you are this type of leader from a marketing perspective if you have so many emails in your inbox unanswered waiting for your input.
Right.
Do you need to give input on that $5,000 ad buy, or do you know that's part of the budget? There's a campaign plan and you're empowering someone to take that. And are you waiting on are you supposed to be giving approval on some sort of social media post? Like all those things that you are probably the holdup.
Yeah.
Because you haven't told the individual internally or the agency that run, go, right. You were empowered, I trust you. So I feel like there's this other piece where you don't do either. Peter's being called during
my apologies.
Very popular over there. But yeah, like to my point, I think that when you ground yourself in these check-in meetings as the person, so like I am talking to you people that are like me, that is supposed to have their foot off the gas of these things. You've given someone else permission to drive the car and you're hanging out in the back, you're doing other things, and you look up to, oh yeah, third house on the right, like, right, like that piece. And yeah, I'm a good example. I think social media for me for a long time, because it was my voice and my baby and my this, like, I'd like to shout out to all the past staff that took on our social media, and I drove them absolutely wild. And now it's like, I don't even look. Like, yeah. I talk strategy with Kaylin quarterly about our social media. We talk about it.
She runs with it.
Yeah, she throws things at me when she has questions. She asks if there's like a big direction change or something new she wants to try. She obviously gets approval, but she knows budget. She knows what needs to be done. She knows our top priorities and themes. I don't need to read every post.
Yeah.
And actually it's kind of fun to like log into LinkedIn and see them and get to engage as someone who is a cheerleader for this organization too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll just say final point maybe on that is just like, obviously at the beginning, you probably should be more involved in a little bit more micromanaging and a little bit more sort of making sure everybody's, going in the direction they should be. But then there's a point at which, you sort of need to kind of take a step back and just let things run and run their course a little bit. And then that's maybe where that, and actually it's interesting. So we've just, final point is like, we've actually implemented like this new process internally where after, the first 2 months of a new client, a new bigger client, we all have like a big team check-in. And then after 6 months, I believe, and then after 12 months, we have another one. So we started these 3, critical check-in points. And it's obviously at the very beginning, we're all very hands-on, roll up our sleeves and really, trying to make sure we set this client up in the right direction and everything's going right and everybody knows what they're doing. So obviously very intensive at the beginning, but then there's a point, where we let the project manager run. And then really there's a check-in. That's not a check-in that's like, we're going to check your work and watch over everything you're doing check-in. It's really a strategic check-in. It's like, okay, so now we've learned how this client functions and we've learned a little bit about their internal culture. We've learned about how maybe, what we sold and what we're delivering. And really the part of the check-in is 1, did we sell the right thing? And do we need to make any course adjustments at this time? And then 2, it's like, okay, we've learned all this stuff about the client. How can we really like now accelerate success for the client based on what we know and how they operate and what their culture's like and whatever. And now can we really bring our creative minds to the table and really make something awesome happen? I think it's a fantastic process. And I think it's a good one and then again, in 6 months, it's like, okay, in 6 months, things might get a little, people might, after 6 months, people might feel like, oh, I've kind of run into some walls here, or I'm not sure what to do there or whatever. It's another great time to be like, okay, let's have another good high level strategic meeting about what challenges are you facing, all that kind of stuff. Right. So I actually think that's a really great frequency of check-in. And that's not to say we don't have constant check-ins all the time, but that's like a really let's take a really good high level look at this situation, this client, as a team. Right. I think, it's a great practice. So,
yeah. So, to recap, I think with your staff, it's that quarterly check-in, right? So if you have marketing team members, those questions that we highlighted at the beginning of the episode. If you're working with an agency, I would say if you're in an industry that isn't changing, if your business plan isn't changing, then at least twice a year, you're meeting with the goal in mind of a relationship check-in. Mm-hmm. So you can put everything on the table and you can have that. I think the majority of folks and businesses should be aiming for a quarterly check-in with an agency that's a longer meeting that kind of dovetails on what you've heard from staff. And then I think those that, are potentially larger, potentially in industries that are shifting and changing quite a bit, lots of boots on the ground, lots happening, monthly meetings with that, it's almost that relationship manager role. The point of escalation, right? So it's not your project manager, it's not your internal project manager or your external project manager. It's like the 2 strategic leads,
right?
The bosses coming together to really analyze and think about, okay, where can we add value and what's next?
Totally.
Cool. Twinsies again. If you like listening to Peter and I just, riff about marketing, you can follow the podcast on iTunes and Spotify and Spreaker. And of course, follow along CIPR Comms on all of the social media channels. And let us know what you'd like us to chat about next. Thank you. 3, 2, 1.